Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
Daniel Cole fell. The salt bit into his knees, chains clinking. Someone kicked him in the ribs and he laughed. A wet, choking sound. He rose slowly, and as he did, his sleeve shifted. A small metal ring slipped free and hit the white ground with a soft ping. It rolled twice, settled, no one saw. 3 rings left, he muttered through split lips, tasting copper and salt. The mob surged around him, 30 scavengers, bone-thin and sun-scorched, beating drums with wrapped hands. Above, the sky was sickly yellow, choked with dust that never settled, and among them walked her. She moved differently than the others. No swagger, no wild gestures, just a steady, predatory grace, her blue-tinted skin catching the harsh light in ways that made her look carved from the same salt and stone as the desert itself. A burn scar ran from her left cheekbone to her jaw, jagged, deliberate, the kind you gave yourself or earned in ritual. Her eyes were the color of deep water, and they fixed on Daniel with a mixture of contempt and something else. Pity, maybe, or recognition. For one heartbeat, no more, their eyes met. Daniel saw something flicker in that blue gaze. Not hatred, not mercy, something sharper. Calculation. As if she were measuring distances he couldn't see. Then her expression hardened again, and she looked away, but the moment hung between them like a held breath. Her name was Asha. He'd heard them call it out when they captured him 3 days ago. She hadn't spoken to him yet, but she watched, always watching. The mob crested a low ridge, and suddenly the ground dropped away. Below them gaped a wound in the earth, a massive pit carved into the salt flats, its edges sharp and geometric, clearly shaped by tools rather than nature. The mine. Wooden platforms clung to its walls like barnacles, connected by rope ladders and rickety bridges that swayed in the wind. Firelight flickered from cave mouths dotting the pit's interior, dozens of them, a honeycomb of darkness and smoke. "Down!" someone shouted, and the mob began to descend. They shoved Daniel toward a rope ladder. His hands were bound, but they didn't care. If he fell, all the better. He gripped the ropes between his forearms and climbed down backward, feet searching for rungs he couldn't see. Halfway down, his boots slipped. For one weightless second, he hung by his wrists alone, chains cutting deeper, and then his feet found purchase again. Asha descended beside him, moving like a spider. "You're either very brave or very stupid," she said. Her voice was low, accented but precise. "Can it be both?" Daniel gasped. "Not for long." They reached a platform and were herded across it toward one of the larger cave mouths. The entrance exhaled warm, sulfurous air that reeked of sweat and burning tallow. Inside, the walls were crystalline salt veined with mineral deposits that caught the torchlight. Copper greens, rust oranges, deep purples. Beautiful in a deadly way. The air was so dry it hurt to breathe. The mob forced Daniel deeper into the cave system, through narrow passages where the ceiling scraped his head and the walls seemed to press inward. Finally, they emerged into a larger chamber, maybe 50 feet across, the floor littered with broken tools, empty water skins and darker stains that Daniel didn't examine too closely. "Here," said the leader, a scarred man with filed teeth and eyes like chips of flint. "You work until you die or until you're useful, probably the first." They unlocked the chains from Daniel's wrist but immediately shackled one ankle to a length of heavy chain bolted into the rock. The other end was attached to a massive iron ring set into the floor. Maybe 10 feet of movement, enough to reach the water bucket in the corner if they decided to give him water. The mob filtered out, still drumming, still singing. Asha lingered near the entrance, half-shadowed. "Why did they bring you here?" Daniel asked quietly. She tilted her head. "I live here." "No. Why are you here? In this chamber? Watching me?" For a moment, something flickered in her watercolored eyes. Surprise, maybe, that he'd noticed. The same calculation he'd seen in the desert, sharper now. "Because they think you might be a spy from the cities, and they want me to find out." "Are you a torturer?" "I'm practical." She turned to leave. "Wait," Daniel said. He shifted his weight, and as he did, another small ring slipped from his remaining sleeve. It hit the stone floor with a clear, bright ting that echoed 3 times in the crystalline chamber. Asha froze. Silence. Daniel counted heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4. From somewhere deep in the mine, distant but unmistakable, came an answering sound. 3 distinct clangs, metal on stone, rhythmic, deliberate, not an echo, a reply. The silence that followed was electric. Asha's hand had already dropped to her knife, her body coiled like a spring. But she didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at Daniel with an expression caught between shock and something that might have been hope, quickly buried. Another sound, fainter from a different direction. 3 knocks, then another response, from somewhere to the east, the rhythm spreading through the mine's tunnels like a heartbeat finding its pulse. Daniel smiled through bloody teeth. Seems like a lot of people are listening. Asha spun back to face him, hand dropping to the crude knife at her belt. What was that? Daniel smiled through bloody teeth. Your choice. What did you do? I left a trail. For who? For anyone who's listening. She crossed the space between them in 3 long strides and crouched down, putting her face inches from his. Up close, he could see the fine network of scars on her blue-tinted skin, the way her pupils contracted to vertical slits in the firelight. Not quite human, not quite alien, something in between that the old world had engineered and the new world had abandoned. You're playing a game you don't understand, she hissed. I understand that you heard that signal, Daniel said, and you recognized it. I recognized nothing. Then why are you still here? She stood abruptly, pacing toward the cave mouth and back. Her hand kept returning to the knife, gripping and releasing. Finally, she stopped and stared down at him with an expression that was almost pleading. If you brought them here, if you led the city's soldiers to this place, they'll kill everyone. Women, children. They don't distinguish. I didn't bring soldiers, Daniel said. Then what did you bring? A chance. She laughed, harsh and bitter. There are no chances left. The cities took them all when they burned our settlements, when they poisoned our wells, when they put prices on our heads like we were animals. I know what they did. You can't possibly. I was there, Daniel said quietly. At Keeper's Crossing, I was one of the engineers who designed the water purification plants that were supposed to help your people. And I watched the military repurpose them into chemical dispensers because it was cheaper than negotiating. Asha went very still. So yes, Daniel continued, I know what they did. I helped them do it. And I've spent the last 2 years trying to undo it, which is how I ended up here, chained to your floor, bleeding on your salt. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. But you heard that signal, and whoever sent it back knows I'm here, which means in about... He glanced at the water clock in the corner, its slow drip marking time. 18 hours, this mine is going to get very crowded. With who? People who've been waiting for permission to stop hiding. Asha's hand tightened on her knife. Riddles. I hate riddles. It's not a riddle. I'm just not sure yet if you're on the list of people who get to hear the answer. She stepped forward, blade out. I could cut it out of you. You could try, but the last person who tortured me died when his tent collapsed on him, structurally unsound. I checked the supports 3 days earlier. Despite everything, Asha's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. You're either insane or a spy. You said that already. Daniel shifted against the wall, wincing as the shackle bit into his ankle. Tell me something. That scar on your face. Did you give it to yourself or did someone do it for you? Her eyes went cold. Why? Because if it's ritual, it means you're someone important. And if you're important, you're the one I need to convince. Convince of what? That there's a third option besides dying here or dying out there. From deep in the mine came another sound. Not the 3-knock signal this time, but something lower and continuous. A rumble. The floor trembled slightly. Dust sifted down from the crystalline ceiling. Asha looked up sharply. No, not now. What is it? The salt shifts sometimes. When too much weight... She didn't finish. She ran to the cave mouth and shouted something in her language. Voices echoed back, urgent and frightened. Daniel braced himself against the wall as the rumbling intensified. Somewhere nearby, Rock cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The torch in its sconce guttered and nearly went out. "We need to move!" Asha shouted over the noise. "I'm chained to the floor." She hesitated for maybe 2 seconds. 2 seconds in which Daniel could see her calculating, weighing his life against her own. And then she was back, slamming a key into the shackle's lock. It clicked open. She hauled him to his feet just as a section of the ceiling collapsed 20 feet away, sending up a choking cloud of salt dust and sulfur. "Run!" They ran. The passages were chaos. Scavengers poured from side tunnels, some carrying children, others dragging the injured. The drums had stopped, but the screaming hadn't. The mine was eating itself from within, centuries of unstable excavation finally giving way. Asha pulled Daniel through the panic with surprising strength, navigating turns and drops he couldn't have managed alone. His leg throbbed where he'd taken the earlier blow, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Behind them, another section gave way with a roar like thunder. They burst onto one of the wooden platforms and Daniel got his first real look at the scale of the disaster. Across the pit, entire sections of the honeycomb structure were collapsing, platforms falling away into darkness. Rope bridges snapping and whipping through the air like severed arteries. Fires bloomed where torches fell into oil stores. The screaming had taken on a mechanical quality. Too much, too loud, impossible to process as individual voices. "This way!" Asha dragged him toward a different tunnel entrance. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere the roof won't crush us." They dove into a smaller passage, narrower than the others, and the sounds of chaos faded slightly behind them. Asha pulled up short, breathing hard, and pressed her back against the wall. Daniel did the same. For a moment they just stood there, chests heaving, covered in white dust that made them both look like ghosts. "You did this," Asha said, not a question. "No, the signals. You weakened the—" "I dropped rings," Daniel said. "Small pieces of metal. They don't weigh enough to collapse a mine. This was already happening. You knew it was happening. That's why you're so desperate." She stared at him. "How?" "Because people who aren't desperate don't drag prisoners through the desert for sport. They negotiate. They trade. This," he gestured at the trembling walls, "this is what extinction looks like. You've been living on borrowed time and everyone here knows it. So what? You came to watch us die more efficiently? I came to offer a door before the roof fell in." Another rumble, closer this time. The passage they'd taken branched ahead, left toward flickering light, right into deeper darkness. "Which way?" Daniel asked. Asha's jaw worked. She looked like she was chewing on something bitter. "You really were at Keeper's Crossing?" "Yes." "Did you see what they did to the children?" Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." "And you still work for them?" "No, I work against them. But they don't know that yet, which is the only reason I'm still alive." The floor lurched. Asha grabbed his arm for balance, and they nearly went down together. When they steadied, she still hadn't let go. "The signal you heard," she said quietly. "It wasn't from the cities, was it?" "No. It was from us. From others like us." "Yes. How many?" "Enough," Daniel said. "If we can get out of this mine alive, if we can get them to trust that I haven't led them into a trap, if we can convince them that working with someone from the cities isn't suicide, that's a lot of ifs. It's more than you had this morning." She released his arm and wiped salt dust from her face, smearing it into pale streaks. "The left passage leads to the old works, abandoned 20 years ago, unstable but less crowded. The right leads to the main refugee chambers. 300 people, maybe more. If the collapse reaches them, then go right," Daniel said. "They'll kill you on sight. Then you'll have to be very convincing." Asha laughed, wild and raw. "You're genuinely insane." "Probably, but I'm also your best chance of getting those 300 people out of this grave before it becomes literal." Another tremor, bigger, the walls spiderwebbed with cracks. "We're out of time," Daniel said. Asha looked at him for one more heartbeat, measuring, deciding, gambling everything on a stranger's word. Then she grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the right passage. They ran into the dark. The refugee chamber was a nightmare painted in firelight. It had been carved from a natural cavern in the salt, expanded over decades into a space large enough to hold hundreds. but it was never meant to withstand this kind of stress. Massive cracks ran across the ceiling like black lightning. Support beams, scavenged metal and ancient wood, groaned under weight they were never designed to bear. And everywhere, people. Families huddled in clusters. Old men and women clutched children who cried without sound, too exhausted for noise. Warriors, if you could call them that, armed with scavenged metal and desperation, formed a perimeter around the chamber's 3 entrances. When Asha and Daniel emerged from the right-hand tunnel, every weapon turned toward them. "Hold!" Asha shouted in her language, then again in the city's tongue. "Hold your fire!" A woman stepped forward, older than Asha, with the same blue-tinted skin, but covered in ritual scars that formed geometric patterns across her arms and neck. Her eyes were milky with age, but sharp with intelligence. She spoke rapidly in the scavenger dialect. Asha responded in kind, gesturing at Daniel, at the cracking ceiling, at the tunnel behind them. The old woman's expression didn't change. She looked at Daniel the way you might look at a snake that's wandered into your home. Dangerous, yes, but also an omen. She said something that made Asha flinch. "What did she say?" Daniel asked. "She said the salt spirits warned that a ghost would come before the final collapse. A man with chains on his wrists and lies on his tongue. Poetic. She wants to know if you're that ghost." Daniel stepped forward, ignoring the weapons that tracked his movement. He held up his wrists, still raw and bleeding from the shackles. "I'm no ghost. I'm an engineer from the cities who got tired of building weapons and started building bridges instead. And yes, I know how that sounds. I know you have every reason to put a blade in me and leave my body for the salt. But..." The ceiling groaned. A chunk of rock the size of a fist fell and shattered near Daniel's feet. "But if we're all going to die in the next hour anyway, maybe you could wait 61 minutes before you kill me? Just to see if I'm lying?" The old woman's mouth twitched. She spoke again, shorter this time. "She says you have strange courage for a ghost," Asha translated. "Tell her thank you." She didn't mean it as a compliment. Another tremor, worse than before. One of the support beams cracked with a sound like a bone breaking. Someone screamed. A child started crying. Just one, but it started a chain reaction. Soon the whole chamber was full of wailing. The old woman shouted something harsh and the crying stopped. Then she turned back to Daniel and spoke in halting city's tongue, each word carefully pronounced. "You say you build bridges. Where is Bridge now?" "Coming," Daniel said, "but we have to meet them halfway." "Who is coming?" "Your people who escaped the purges. The ones who've been hiding in the eastern canyons for 2 years. The ones who received my signals and have been waiting for proof that it's not a trap." Silence. Even the warriors looked uncertain now. "How many?" the old woman asked. "About 100 fighters. Maybe twice that in families." "Lies," someone spat from the crowd. "The cities killed them all at Keeper's Crossing." "No," Daniel said flatly. "The cities killed 47 people at Keeper's Crossing. I was there. I counted the bodies. The rest scattered before the soldiers arrived because someone warned them. Someone inside the engineering corps who'd seen the orders 3 days early. That person was me." "Why should we believe?" "Because he's still alive," Asha cut in. "Think about it. If the cities wanted to trap us, they'd send an army, not one man in chains. If they wanted to kill us, they'd just wait for the mine to finish the job. He's here because he's either telling the truth or he's the worst spy in history." "Could be both," someone muttered. The old woman raised a hand for silence. She studied Daniel with those milky eyes, and he had the uncomfortable sense that she could see more than he wanted to show. Finally she spoke, not to him, but to Asha. Asha nodded and turned to Daniel. "She says you can prove your words. She says if your people are coming, they'll follow the signals you left. So we wait at the mouth of the mine, and we see who arrives first, your bridge or the city's swords." "That's a death trap if I'm wrong," Daniel said. "Yes. And you're willing to risk 300 lives on it?" "We're already dead," the old woman said quietly. "The mine dies. We die with it. Your bridge is maybe a dream, but better to die reaching for a dream than to die in this hole in the dark." As if to emphasize her point, another section of ceiling collapsed on the far side of the chamber. The screaming started again. "Then we move now," Daniel said, "before there's nothing left to save." The evacuation was controlled chaos. The warriors formed a vanguard, weapons out, eyes scanning every shadow. Behind them came the old, the sick, the children, carried, dragged, pulled along by family members who'd already lost too much to lose more. Asha moved through them like a sheepdog, organizing, directing, keeping panic from turning into stampede. The old woman, matriarch Kessa, Daniel learned her name, walked near the front, leaning on a staff made from scavenged rebar, but refusing help. Daniel brought up the rear with a handful of fighters who looked at him like they were trying to decide whether to shoot him now or later. Every 20 feet he'd pause and tap a specific rhythm on the wall, 3 short, 1 long, and listen for the echo. Each time it came back, closer now, definitely closer. They emerged onto the main platform as the sun was setting, or trying to. Through the perpetual dust haze, the light was the color of old blood. The desert stretched away in all directions, white and pitiless. And somewhere out there, Daniel's breadcrumb trail of metal rings marked a path that either led to salvation or betrayal. "How long?" Kessa asked. "They should be—" Daniel stopped, tilted his head. "Listen." At first there was nothing but wind and the settling groans of the dying mine. Then faint but distinct, a rhythmic sound. Metal on metal, not random, deliberate. The response to his signal, and it was coming from the north. "There," Asha said, pointing. Figures were emerging from the heat shimmer, distant still, but moving fast. Daniel counted. 15, 20, 30 shapes, more appearing behind them. They moved in formation, disciplined, organized in a way that made the fighters around him tense. "If those are soldiers," someone started. "They're not," Daniel said, but his heart was hammering because he couldn't be sure. He'd sent the signals, laid the trail, made the promises, but he'd never seen confirmation, never had direct contact. Everything was built on hope and engineering, and the desperate belief that somewhere, someone was listening. The figures resolved as they approached. Not soldiers, refugees, men and women with the same blue-tinted skin as Asha's people, carrying children and weapons in equal measure. They wore desert cloaks made from salvaged fabric, and their faces were wrapped against the wind. But their eyes burned with something Daniel recognized. Determination, the kind you only get after surviving the unsurvivable. At their head walked a man, tall, scarred, missing his left arm below the elbow. He raised his remaining hand in a gesture that Asha immediately returned. "Kyle," she breathed. "You know him?" Daniel asked. "My brother." The two groups stopped about 30 feet apart, close enough to see faces, far enough to run if needed. Kyle unwrapped the cloth from his face and stared at the refugees spilling from the mine. His expression went through shock, disbelief, desperate hope. Then his eyes found Asha, and something in him broke. They ran to each other and collided in an embrace that looked like it hurt. Asha was making sounds that weren't quite words. Kale held her with his one arm like he could keep her from disappearing through sheer force of will. When they finally separated, both had tears cutting tracks through the salt dust on their faces. "We thought," Kyle started. "I know," Asha said. "We thought you were dead too." "I almost was. We all almost were." He looked past her to the crowd of refugees, his gaze lingering on matriarch Kessa, who was weeping silently. "Mother of storms, so many. How?" "The mine. We've been hiding in the mine for 2 years. It's not safe. We know. It's collapsing. We have to move everyone now." Cal nodded and turned to his people, started barking orders in rapid-fire dialect. They immediately began organizing into groups: scouts, rear guard, carriers for the injured. Military efficiency learned through necessity. Then Kyle's eyes found Daniel. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides and grabbed Daniel by the front of his torn shirt. You're the one who left the trail?" "Yes." "The signals?" "Yes." "You're from the cities?" "Yes." Kale's jaw clenched. For a moment, Daniel thought he was about to be thrown off the platform. Then Kale released him and stepped back. "You're either the bravest man I've met or the stupidest. Haven't decided which." "I've been getting that a lot today," Daniel said. "The trail led us straight here. If this was a trap, it wasn't." "If it was," Kale continued, We just brought 100 fighters and twice that in civilians straight into the city's crosshairs. So you'd better pray to whatever gods you have that you're telling the truth." "I don't pray," Daniel said, "but I count. And I left exactly 37 rings over a distance of 12 miles, each one placed at an acoustically optimal location to bounce signals through the canyon systems. If I wanted to trap you, I'd have led you somewhere flat where you couldn't escape. Instead, I led you to a place with 3 exit routes and natural cover." Kyle stared at him. "You're an engineer." "Yes. The city's engineers designed the purification plants that killed my wife." Daniel met his eyes steadily. "I know. I was one of them. That's why I'm here." The silence stretched. Behind them, the mine groaned as another section collapsed. Someone shouted a warning, but Kyle and Daniel stood locked in a stare that was really a negotiation, weighing sins and intentions and the impossible math of redemption. Finally, Kyle spat to the side and turned away. "If you get my people killed, I'll haunt you in the next life." "Fair enough. And if you save them," Kyle paused, looked back, "I still won't forgive you, but I'll remember." "I'll take it." The combined group moved east as the sun finished setting, following Kale's people toward the canyon systems they'd been hiding in. It was slow going. Too many children, too many injured, too many people who'd been living underground for 2 years and didn't have the stamina for desert travel. But they moved because stopping meant dying. Daniel walked near the middle of the column, flanked by Asha on one side and a suspicious fighter named Torn on the other. Every few minutes, Torn would glare at him like he was trying to set Daniel on fire through sheer force of hatred. "You can just ask," Daniel finally said. "Ask what?" "Whatever question is making you look at me like that." Torn spat. "Why'd you do it?" "Do what?" "All of this. The signals. The trail. Coming here." He gestured at the column of refugees. "You're from the cities. Your people have everything. Food, water, walls, power. Why throw it away to help us?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You ever build something you were proud of?" "I'm a fighter, not a builder." "Humor me. You ever make something, anything, that you looked at and thought, that's good, that matters?" Torn's jaw worked. "Once. Helped my father build a well in our settlement. Took us 3 months to dig it, stone by stone. Water was sweet, clean. Everyone said it was the best well in the region. What happened to it? The cities poisoned it, part of the Scorched Earth campaign. They filled it with chemicals and sealed it shut. My father tried to dig a new one, but he stopped, cleared his throat. He died before we found water." "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "Don't want your sorry, want an answer." Daniel pointed at the refugees ahead of them, at a little girl being carried on her mother's back, at an old man limping but refusing help, at all the impossible, stubborn life that kept going despite everything. "I spent 5 years building things that killed people," he said, "some directly like weapons platforms, some indirectly like your father's well. And I told myself it was necessary. I told myself it was for the greater good, for security, for the future. And then one day I was standing in Keeper's Crossing, watching soldiers use one of my designs to pump poison into a water supply. And there was a child, maybe 6 years old, filling a bucket, and I thought, this is what I built. This moment, this death. Me. So you decided to switch sides?" "No, I decided to stop having sides. I decided to start building bridges instead of walls." "Bridges," Torrin said flatly. "We're in the middle of a desert, and you're talking about bridges." "Bridges aren't about rivers," Daniel said. "They're about getting from one place to another when the ground between is impossible. You and Kale's people, you've been on different sides of impossible for 2 years, thinking the other was dead, and now you're walking together. That's a bridge." Torrin looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the angle. Finally, he just shook his head. "You're strange." "So I've heard." Ahead, the column was slowing. Cal raised a fist and everyone stopped. Daniel could hear it now, a deep rumbling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Not the mine this time, something else. "Storm," Asha said, pointing. On the horizon, the dust clouds were rising like a wall. Lightning flickered inside them, green and purple, the kind of electrical discharge that happened when the old world's chemical weapons mixed with atmospheric moisture. It lit the desert in stroboscopic flashes. "How long?" Kyle shouted back. 20 minutes, someone called. "Maybe less." "The canyons?" 15 minutes at forced march. Kyle turned to face the column. His voice carried despite the rising wind. "We run. Warriors in front and back, civilians in the middle. If you fall, we pick you up. If you can't be picked up..." He stopped, looked at Matriarch Kessa. She nodded once, giving permission for the terrible calculus of survival. "We keep moving," Kale finished. "The storm will kill us all if we stop." They ran. Daniel had run from things before, soldiers, collapse, his own conscience, but he'd never run with an entire people depending on his legs keeping pace. Children cried as they were jostled. Old ones gasped and wheezed but kept moving. The warriors practically carried some of them, rotating the burden so no one exhausted themselves. The storm was getting closer. Daniel could taste it now. Acrid, metallic, wrong. Behind them, the wall of dust and lightning loomed like the end of the world. 10 minutes. His lungs burned. His injured legs screamed with every step, but he didn't slow because slowing meant falling, and falling meant dying, and dying meant he'd failed. Asha grabbed his arm and pulled him forward, lending strength he didn't have. "There!" someone shouted. The canyons rose ahead, jagged walls of striated rock that looked like wounds in the earth. Narrow passages between them, cover, safety, maybe. 5 minutes. The first refugees reached the canyon mouth and disappeared into its shadows. More followed. The column compressed as everyone tried to fit through the narrow entrance at once. Kyle and his fighters formed a wall, organizing the chaos, pushing people through in groups. The storm hit the rear guard. 1 second they were running. The next, the wall of dust swallowed them, screaming, immediate and terrible. Daniel turned to see shapes disappearing into the churning green lightning. Torrin was there, and then he wasn't. A woman carrying 2 children stumbled and fell, and the dust took her. "Keep moving," Kyle roared. Daniel grabbed a child whose mother had fallen behind and ran for the canyon. Asha was beside him doing the same, carrying an old woman on her back. The storm was a living thing now, howling and hungry, reaching with tendrils of poison wind. They made it through the canyon mouth and collapsed against the stone. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, people gasped and coughed and counted their missing. The old woman Asha had carried wasn't breathing. She tried to revive her, but Matriarch Kessa stopped her, placed gentle fingers on Asha's shoulder, and shook her head. Too many losses to count immediately, but more survived than Daniel had dared hope. He set down the child he'd carried, a boy, maybe 8, with wide, terrified eyes. The boy latched onto an older girl who might have been his sister. They held each other and didn't speak. Daniel slid down the canyon wall and sat in the dust, trembling. His injured leg had left a blood trail. He hadn't noticed. Asha collapsed beside him, breathing hard, and for a moment neither of them spoke. They just sat there, alive, while the storm screamed outside and the survivors wept quietly in the darkness. Then Daniel caught movement in his peripheral vision. He turned his head. His blood, the trail he'd left, was glowing. Not brightly, just a faint phosphorescence where it had soaked into the salt crystalline floor of the canyon. Blue-green light pulsing softly in the darkness, like bioluminescent algae in deep water. Each drop a tiny star. Asha saw it too. She stared, transfixed. Others noticed. The weeping stopped. People turned to look at the glowing blood trail that led from the storm outside to where Daniel sat, marking their path to safety with light. No one spoke. The moment stretched, fragile, impossibly beautiful. The storm howled, but inside the canyon there was only silence and the soft glow of Daniel's blood mixing with ancient salt, creating something none of them had ever seen. Matriarch Kessa approached slowly, knelt, and touched one of the glowing drops with her fingertip. When she looked up at Daniel, her milky eyes were wet with tears. "The salt remembers," she whispered. "It remembers everything we've lost, everyone who bled here, and now it remembers that we survived." The glow began to fade, slowly, reluctantly. But for those few seconds, the canyon had been lit not by fire or lightning, but by the simple proof that they were still alive, that they had made it through. 12, she said. "What?" "We lost 12, maybe more when we count, but we saved 300. Because you left breadcrumbs. We're not done yet, Daniel said. I know, but right now in this moment, 300 people are breathing who wouldn't be if you'd stayed in the cities. He looked at her, at the exhaustion in her eyes, the hope fighting with despair, the impossible strength that kept her moving when moving should have been impossible. Your brother, Daniel said. Kyle, he said the cities killed his wife. Yes. Were you there? Yes. I'm sorry. You said that already. I mean it. Asha leaned her head back against the stone and closed her eyes. Do you know what the worst part was? They didn't even hate us. The soldiers, they were just following orders, just doing their job, just protecting their cities from the threat they'd been told we represented. They didn't even think we were people, just problems to solve. I know, Daniel said quietly. How could you know? Because I was one of them. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked, not at the engineer or the spy or the bridge builder, but at the man who designed deaths and now carried them like chains he couldn't remove. Do you think it's possible, she asked, to build enough bridges to make up for the walls? I don't know, Daniel said, but I have to try, because the alternative is living with what I built and doing nothing. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Inside, the canyon offered temporary shelter, but temporary was all it would ever be. Cal appeared from deeper in the passage, his face grim. We have a problem. Just one? Asha muttered. The canyon system connects to the old mining tunnels about 2 miles east. My scouts just came back. The cities have a garrison there now. 50 soldiers, maybe more, blocking the main route to the water sources. Daniel stood, wincing as his leg protested. When did they arrive? 3 days ago, according to scouts, right after the last supply convoy. 3 days. Daniel's mind raced through the timing. That's when I was captured. They're not there by accident. Meaning someone in the cities knows I left, knows I came here, and they sent soldiers to cut off the escape routes. How would they know? Asha demanded. Daniel pulled up his torn sleeve, revealing his forearm. In the dim light of the canyon, small marks were visible. Not tattoos, but something technological. Faint geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly. Tracker, he said. Bio-integrated. I knew it was there. I just didn't know they'd activate it so soon. You led them straight to us, someone spat from the crowd that had gathered. No, I led them to me. There's a difference. Not from where we're standing, Kale said. His hand was on his weapon now. Wait, Asha said. If they're tracking him, why send only 50 soldiers? The cities have hundreds they could deploy. Because 50 is enough to hold a garrison, Daniel said. They're not trying to slaughter everyone. They're trying to contain, to wait until we run out of water and come to them. Then we fight, Kale said. You'll lose. Your people are exhausted, low on ammunition, and half of them are children and elders. The city's soldiers have training, equipment, and fortified positions. So what do you suggest? We wait here until we die of thirst? No. Daniel pulled something from his pocket, a small metallic device, no bigger than a coin. We use their trap against them. Matriarch Kessa stepped forward. Explain. The tracker in my arm has a transmitter. It's passive, just sends location data, but I can overload it, turn it into an active beacon that broadcasts on emergency frequencies. Why would you do that? Because emergency frequencies trigger automatic response protocols, medical evacuation, officer down, high-value asset in danger. They'll pull soldiers from the garrison to respond. How many? Enough to weaken their position, not enough to leave it completely undefended, but enough that a strike team might get through. Kale's eyes narrowed. You're talking about making yourself bait. Yes. They'll kill you. Probably, but they'll hesitate first. Because I'm not just a defector. I'm an engineer with classified information. They'll want to take me alive, question me, find out what I told you. That hesitation is the window. And if you're wrong, then I die slightly faster than the rest of you. But at least I'll die trying to fix what I broke. Silence. The storm howled outside. Somewhere in the canyon, a child was crying, the sound thin and exhausted. Matriarch Kessa spoke. The salt spirits showed me a vision once. A man with chains on his wrists and fire in his blood, standing between two armies. I thought it meant death. Perhaps it meant choice. Riddles again, Torin muttered. No, the old woman said. Truth. This man brings danger, yes, but also possibility. We can hide from danger and die slowly, or we can embrace it and die quickly. Or, she looked at Daniel, perhaps we don't die at all. Kale spat. I hate this plan. That's not a no, Daniel said. It's not a yes either. Kale looked at his sister. Asha? She was staring at Daniel with an expression he couldn't read. Finally, she said, if we do this, we need to move now, before the storm clears and they realize we're bottled up. Agreed, Daniel said, and you need to show me how to overload that tracker, because if you're going to be bait, you're going to need someone watching your back. Asha, Kyle started. Don't, she cut him off. You have 300 people to lead. I have one idiot engineer to keep alive. We both have our jobs. Kyle looked between them, and something passed across his face. Worry, resignation, a kind of grim acceptance. If you die, I'm going to be very angry. Noted, Asha said. And you, Kale pointed at Daniel. If she dies because of you, I don't care if you save 1,000 people. I'll hunt you through every afterlife until I find you. Fair, Daniel said. Kale turned and started barking orders. The canyon came alive with motion. Warriors checking weapons, families being moved to more defensible positions, scouts preparing to move out. In the chaos, Daniel and Asha found a quiet corner. Show me, she said. Daniel sat and rolled up his sleeve completely. The geometric patterns on his forearm glowed faintly, bioluminescent markers tied to his nervous system. The tracker's integrated with my radial nerve. I can trigger a cascade feedback that'll overload it, but it's going to hurt. A lot. How much is a lot? I might pass out, or scream, or both. Wonderful. Asha pulled a knife from her belt. And after you trigger it? We have maybe 15 minutes before they respond. We need to be in position, close enough to the garrison that they see the signal origin, far enough that we have room to maneuver. There's a rise about a quarter mile from the garrison. Old watchtower ruins. Good sightlines. Perfect. Daniel pressed 2 fingers to the center of the glowing pattern and began tracing specific shapes. The glow intensified, pulsing faster. When the beacon goes active, it'll broadcast continuously. The cities will send a team, probably 8 to 12 soldiers. We need to lead them away from the garrison, keep them busy while Kale's strike team moves in. How do we keep 12 soldiers busy? Very carefully. Daniel's fingers were shaking now. The patterns were blazing, heat building under his skin. And we need to survive long enough for the strike team to secure the water source and get back. How long is that? 20 minutes, maybe 30. So we need to fight 12 trained soldiers for half an hour with no backup and no way out. When you say it like that, it sounds bad. Asha laughed, sharp and bitter. It is bad. It's suicide. You don't have to come. She met his eyes. Yes, I do. Because someone needs to make sure you don't accidentally signal the wrong frequency and call in an airstrike instead of a rescue team. That was one time, and it was an accident. I don't want to know. The patterns on Daniel's arm were burning now, spreading tendrils of heat up toward his shoulder. His vision blurred. It's ready. Once I release, there's no stopping it. Then don't release yet. Asha grabbed his wrist. Not the marked one, the other. I need to know something first. What? If this works, if we somehow survive and the water source is secured and my people actually make it out of this, what happens to you? Where do you go? Daniel blinked, surprised by the question. I hadn't thought that far. Think now. I suppose I keep moving, keep building bridges. There are other settlements, other people who need... That's not what I asked. Her grip tightened. I asked where you go, not what you do. Who you're with. He looked at her, really looked, at the burn scar on her face and the watercolored eyes and the impossible strength wrapped around fear and hope in equal measure. And he realized what she was asking, what she was offering. I don't know, he said honestly. I've been running for so long, I forgot there might be somewhere to run to. Well, Asha said, releasing his wrist, try to remember while we're not dying. It'll give you something to focus on besides the pain. Is that supposed to be comforting? No, it's supposed to be true. Daniel smiled despite everything. Then he pressed his thumb into the center of the pattern and released the cascade. The pain was immediate and absolute. It felt like his arm was being dissolved from the inside out, nerves igniting one after another in a chain reaction of agony. He bit down on his sleeve to keep from screaming and tasted blood. The patterns blazed white-hot, then began pulsing in a rapid staccato that could only be the emergency beacon activating. Asha caught him as he collapsed, lowering him to the ground. "Breathe, just breathe." He tried, failed, tried again. The world was spinning, colors inverting, sound becoming liquid. Through it all, the beacon pulsed. He could feel it broadcasting, sending its distress signal out across every emergency frequency the cities monitored. Officer down, high-value asset, medical emergency, location locked. Somewhere alarms were going off. Somewhere soldiers were scrambling. Somewhere the trap was springing, but he was the one caught in it. "Stay with me," Asha said. She was doing something to his arm, wrapping it, maybe, or trying to cool it. He couldn't tell. Everything was fire and static. Did it work?" he managed. "It's broadcasting. I can see the pulse." She pressed something cool against his forehead. "Now we move. Can you stand?" He couldn't, but he did anyway, because the alternative was dying here on the canyon floor, and he'd promised to at least die somewhere more interesting. Asha pulled his good arm over her shoulder, and they started moving. Slowly at first, then faster as feeling returned to his legs. They emerged from the canyon into the aftermath of the storm. The air was still thick with dust, but the lightning had stopped. The desert was a wasteland of sculpted drifts and chemical residue that glowed faintly in the darkness. Beautiful and deadly. "This way." Asha guided them east, moving parallel to the canyon system. Behind them, Kale's strike team was already departing through a different route. 20 warriors, the best they had, moving silent and fast toward the garrison. The plan was in motion, no stopping now. The watchtower ruins materialized from the dust like a ghost. Ancient stone, pre-war construction, half buried in salt drifts. The walls still stood, but the roof had collapsed long ago. Good cover, good sightlines, a perfect place to make a last stand. They climbed into the ruins and took position behind a section of intact wall. Daniel slumped against the stone, cradling his still-burning arm. Asha positioned herself at a gap that offered a view of the approach from the garrison. "How long?" she asked. Daniel checked his arm. The beacon was still pulsing, bright enough now that it cast shadows. They should have received the signal by now. Response time from garrison to our position? 10 minutes, maybe less if they're fast. And Cal's team? They need at least 20 minutes to reach the water source, secure it, and get back. So we hold for at least 10 minutes longer than they take to kill us. Optimistic. I like it. Asha pulled out her weapon, a crude rifle, scavenged and rebuilt so many times it barely resembled its original form. She checked the magazine. 15 rounds plus a knife, plus anger, against 12 soldiers with military-grade equipment. We also have the element of surprise. They know we're here. That's literally the entire plan. Right. Poor phrasing. Daniel pulled out his own weapon, a compact pistol he'd taken from a dead soldier months ago. 7 rounds. He'd been saving them for something important. This qualified. At least we're not bored. I'd take bored. Liar. She smiled, quick and fierce. Maybe a little. They fell silent, watching the approach. The dust was settling, visibility improving. Daniel could see the garrison now, a squat concrete structure about 3/4 of a mile away, lights visible through narrow windows, movement on the walls. They knew something was happening. 5 minutes passed, 7, then motion. Figures emerging from the garrison, moving in formation. Daniel counted. 8, 9, 11 soldiers. Good. More than he'd hoped. Kale's strike team would have better odds now. Bad for him and Asha, but that was always part of the equation. The soldiers moved fast, disciplined, covering ground in leaping bounds that spoke of enhanced physiology, standard for cities' military. They'd be stronger, faster, harder to kill than normal humans. But they'd also be confident, overconfident, maybe. They were coming to rescue a valuable asset, not expecting a fight. That would be their mistake. "Here they come," Asha breathed. The soldiers reached the base of the rise and began climbing. Their commander, identified by slightly different armor, raised a hand and the formation split. 4 soldiers continued straight up. The other 7 began circling to flank. "They're not stupid," Daniel muttered. "No, but they think you're helpless and I'm alone." "You are alone. I can barely hold this pistol." "Then shoot sitting down." The first soldier crested the rise and immediately caught sight of them. He raised his weapon, started to shout a challenge, and Asha shot him through the throat. He went down without a sound. All hell broke loose. The other soldiers opened fire, rounds chewing through the ancient stone. Asha dropped behind cover, pulled Daniel down with her. Chips of rock rained down. The noise was deafening. "3 from the front," she shouted. 4 trying to circle. Daniel leaned around the wall and fired twice, forcing the flanking soldiers to take cover, but not hitting anything. His arm was shaking too much for accuracy. The beacon continued its relentless pulse, lighting up their position like a target. Asha fired again, measured shots, making every round count. Another soldier went down, clutching his leg. The others adjusted, becoming more cautious. "They're calling for backup," Daniel said, seeing one soldier speaking rapidly into his comm unit. "How long until—" The wall exploded beside them. Not bullets. Something heavier. Grenade launcher maybe, or a rocket. Daniel's ears rang. Stone fragments tore into his already injured leg. Asha grabbed him, and they rolled away from the crumbling wall section, taking new cover behind a fallen pillar. "This is going well," Daniel gasped. "Shut up and shoot." He did. They both did. A desperate exchange of fire that lasted seconds or hours. Daniel couldn't tell. Time had become fluid, marked only by the beacon's pulse and the crack of gunfire and the screaming of his injured arm. Another explosion. Closer. The pillar cracked. "We can't hold this position," Asha said. "We have to. Just a few more minutes. We'll be dead in—" Something whistled through the air. Grenade. Daniel saw it hit the ground 3 feet away, and without thinking, he kicked it. His injured leg screamed in protest, but the grenade skittered away, over the far wall of the ruins. It detonated in midair, showering the desert with shrapnel. "Lucky," Asha breathed. "Calculated," Daniel lied. The soldiers were advancing now, emboldened. 5 of them, no, 6, coming from multiple angles. Too many to fight. The commander was shouting something in City's military code. They wanted Daniel alive, but they'd stopped caring about collateral damage. Asha's rifle clicked empty. She dropped it, drew her knife. "This is it. Wait." Daniel looked at his burning arm, at the relentless pulse of the beacon. An idea formed. Desperate, stupid, probably fatal. "The beacon. It's broadcasting on emergency frequencies." "So?" "Emergency frequencies include automated defense protocols." "I don't—" "Give me your knife." "What?" "Trust me. Give me your knife." She handed it over. Daniel pressed the blade to his forearm, right above the tracker. The pain was already so immense that a little more barely registered. He cut, not deep, just enough to reach the bio-integrated circuits beneath the skin. Blood welled up, mixing with the light from the patterns. And he started carving, changing the signal, reprogramming it on the fly using the only interface available, his own mutilated flesh. The patterns shifted, reorganized. The pulse frequency changed, climbing higher into ranges that made his teeth ache. "What are you doing?" Asha demanded. "Triggering. The other protocol." He was shaking violently now, vision graying at the edges. "The one they use for officer down in hostile territory, which is—" He finished the last cut and the pattern blazed white. The frequency hit a peak and suddenly, the sound was inaudible to human ears, but every soldier on the rise stopped moving. Their heads snapped up, hands going to their ears. Confusion, fear. Something was wrong with their enhanced audio systems, feedback screaming through their implants. "Automated suppression protocol," Daniel gasped, "disables enhanced systems, in radius around emergency beacon, prevents hostiles from using captured equipment. You're shutting down their enhancements? For maybe 90 seconds. Then the system recalibrates." "Then we move now," Asha grabbed him and they ran, not away from the soldiers but toward them. Straight down the rise, directly at the disoriented soldiers who were tearing at their helmets, trying to stop the feedback. She hit the first one before he could recover. Knife to the gut, twist, pull free. Grabbed his weapon and kept moving. The second soldier was recovering, bringing his rifle up. Asha shot him in the face. Daniel wasn't running anymore. He was falling in a controlled direction, using momentum and Asha's strength to stay vertical. They crashed through the confused soldiers like an avalanche. Brutal, desperate, impossible. Another soldier down. Another. The commander was screaming orders, but his enhanced vocal system was offline. His voice came out as a pathetic rasp that no one could hear over the chaos. And then they were past, stumbling down the far side of the rise, leaving 6 soldiers dead or dying and the rest still recovering. 90 seconds. That's all they'd bought. "Where now?" Asha gasped. "Anywhere but here." They ran into the desert, away from the garrison, away from the ruins. Behind them, shouting, soldiers recovering, pursuit beginning. Daniel's vision was fading. The blood loss, the pain, the sheer impossibility of still being alive. It was catching up. He stumbled, fell. Asha tried to catch him, but they both went down in the salt. "Get up," she urged. "Please, get up." He tried, couldn't. The beacon on his arm was dying now, its light flickering. The cascade had burned itself out. No more signals, no more tricks. "Asha," he said, "listen." "No, don't you dare!" 23 minutes. That's how long we held them. Kyle's team, they should be clear by now. The water source should be secured. "I don't care about you should, because that's what this was for. You and your people, you get to live. That's the bridge. Right there." Footsteps. Close. The surviving soldiers had recovered and were coming. Asha pulled her knife again. "Then we both get to live. Get up." "I can't." "You're an engineer. Engineers solve problems. So solve this one." Daniel laughed, a wet, painful sound. "I'm sorry, I'm out of solutions." "Then I guess we die here." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She positioned herself over him, knife ready, facing the approaching soldiers. Daniel could see them now, 3 figures emerging from the dust, weapons raised. Asha tensed. This was the end. After everything, the mines, the storm, the desperate gambit, it would end here in the salt with bullets and blood, and at least they'd fought for something. The soldiers raised their weapons, and then a sound, distant but distinct, rhythmic, metal on metal, 3 slow knocks. Asha's head snapped around. "No, that's..." The desert erupted. Figures rose from concealed positions in the salt drifts. Kyle's warriors, at least a dozen of them, who'd been waiting in ambush. They fell on the 3 soldiers like a storm, overwhelming them in seconds. More warriors poured from hidden positions, surrounding the position. Kyle himself appeared, his one arm carrying a captured city's rifle, like it weighed nothing. He looked at his sister, at Daniel dying in the salt, and his expression went through surprise, relief, and fury in rapid succession. "You're early," Asha said weakly. "The garrison was undermanned," Kyle said. "We took it faster than expected. Then we heard the explosions and came running." He knelt beside Daniel. "You're an idiot." "Calculated risk," Daniel whispered. "Calculated stupidity." But Kyle was already gesturing to his warriors. "Get him up. Medical supplies from the garrison. Move." "The water source," Daniel managed. "Secured. Intact. Enough for everyone, at least for a few months." Kyle's jaw clenched. "You bought us that. With your life, apparently." "Not dead yet. Close enough that I can see it." Daniel wanted to argue, but darkness was closing in. He could hear Asha's voice, urgent, frightened, and Kale responding, and other voices joining in. The sound of survival, of a people who'd been given one more chance. He'd built his bridge. Whether he got to cross it or not, that was someone else's decision now. The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was Asha's face, silhouetted against the stars beginning to emerge through the clearing dust. She was crying, or smiling, or both. Maybe that was answer enough. He woke to pain, not the consuming agony from before. that had dulled to a persistent, grinding ache. This was different, sharper, focused, the pain of healing, not dying. Daniel opened his eyes. Stone ceiling, firelight casting dancing shadows, the smell of herbs and something chemical, medical supplies, probably looted from the garrison. He was alive. That was surprising. Finally, he turned his head, slowly because everything hurt, and found Asha sitting beside him. She looked exhausted. Her burn scar seemed darker in the firelight, more prominent, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with symmetry. "How long?" he rasped. 3 days. You've been in and out. Mostly out." She held up a water skin. "Drink." He did, grateful. The water was sweet and cold. From the secured source, he realized. The source they'd fought for. The others? Safe. All 300 from the mine, plus the 100 who came with Kale. The garrison had food stores, medical supplies, ammunition. We're fortified and we have time to plan our next move. Casualties? 17 total, 12 in the storm, 5 in the assault on the garrison, including Torin. Her voice went flat. He saved 3 children before a wall collapsed on him. "I'm sorry. He thought you were insane." Asha managed a small smile. "But he died proving you right, that the bridge was real, that it was worth dying for." Daniel tried to sit up. His body vetoed the idea immediately. Asha pushed him back down with gentle pressure. "You're not healed yet. The garrison doctor, one of the soldiers surrendered, said he didn't sign up to massacre refugees. He's been treating you. Says you lost a lot of blood. Your arm is infected from what you did to yourself." She touched his bandaged forearm carefully. "He doesn't know if you'll regain full use of it." "Worth it. Is it?" She leaned closer. "You almost died. You did die, technically. Your heart stopped twice. Kyle had to restart it. Do you understand how close?" "I understand, but the alternative was everyone dying, including you. So yes, worth it." Asha was quiet for a long moment. Then she took something from her pocket, a small iron ring, the same one Daniel had given her in the mine. She held it between them, saying nothing. The firelight caught the metal, made it glow like a small captured sun. Then slowly, deliberately, she reached for his hand, the uninjured one. She placed the ring in his palm and closed his fingers around it. Her hand stayed there, covering his. The gesture said everything words couldn't. "I choose this. I choose you. We survived." Daniel's throat tightened. He opened his hand and they both looked at the ring. This small circle of metal that had traveled from mine to desert to here, carrying weight far beyond its size. 37 promises, Asha whispered finally. "You kept everyone?" She took the ring back and slipped it onto her thumb. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, the gesture of trust from her culture. "So now it's my turn to promise," she said quietly. "You don't get to die. You don't get to sacrifice yourself and think that's the end of your story, because we need you. Not as an engineer, not as a bridge builder, just as you." "Asha, I'm not finished." She took his hand, the uninjured one. "When you asked where you go after this, I told you to figure it out. So here's your answer. You go wherever we go. You stay with us, with me, because you gave us a future and now you're part of it." Daniel felt something warm behind his eyes. None of us deserve anything. We just get what we fight for, and I'm fighting to keep you alive." She squeezed his hand. "So fight with me, please." He looked at her, at the impossible strength wrapped in vulnerability, at the person who'd held a knife over him and then held his life together when it was falling apart. And he thought about bridges, about how they only work if both sides hold their end. "Okay," he whispered, "I'll fight." "Good." She smiled, genuine, bright, transforming her scarred face into something radiant. "Because Kale is planning an expedition to contact other survivor groups, and I volunteered us both." "You volunteered me while I was unconscious?" "You would have said yes anyway." "Fair point." Outside the cave, voices rose in song, something ancient and mournful, but also defiant. A funeral song, Daniel realized, for those who died. But underneath the mourning was something else. Hope. The knowledge that 17 had died so that 400 could live. That was the mathematics of survival. the calculus of sacrifice. But maybe, Daniel thought, it could also be the beginning of something different. A world where the equation changed, where fewer people had to die for others to live, where bridges outnumbered walls. It would take time, probably more time than he had, probably more pain than any of them deserved. But looking at Asha's scarred face and determined eyes, feeling the weight of the iron ring on his chest and the warmth of her hand in his, for the first time in years, Daniel thought it might actually be possible. 3 rings left, he muttered, remembering that first stumbling march across the salt. What? Asha asked. Something I said when they captured me. 3 rings left in my sleeve. But I was wrong. How many were there really? He smiled. 37 promises. And 1 answer. She tilted her head, curious. The answer to where I go from here, Daniel said. I go with you, wherever that is. Asha leaned down and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture from her culture, he knew, of trust and acceptance. Her voice was barely a whisper. Then welcome home, bridge builder. Outside, the song continued. Inside, 2 people who should have been enemies held each other in the firelight and dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, the war could end differently than everyone expected. Not with final victory, not with total defeat, but with a bridge. 6 months later, the desert bloomed. Not with flowers, nothing so gentle could survive here, but with movement, with purpose. The garrison that had once held enemies now housed an alliance. 400 refugees had become 700 as other scattered groups heard the signals and followed the trail of iron rings. Not all the rings Daniel had left originally. New ones now, new promises. Asha stood on the garrison's outer wall, watching the sun set through the perpetual dust. Beside her, Daniel leaned on a crutch. His leg had healed mostly, but not completely. His arm was worse. The infection had cost him most of the feeling in his fingers. He couldn't do detailed engineering work anymore, but he could still build bridges. Cal says the cities are sending diplomats, Asha said. Not soldiers, diplomats. Progress, Daniel said, or a trap. Maybe both. She smiled at that. Over the months, they developed a rhythm, her caution tempering his optimism, his hope tempering her cynicism. It worked. They worked. Will you meet with them? She asked. Do I have a choice? No, but I wanted to pretend you did. Diplomatic. Daniel shifted his weight, trying to ease the ache in his leg. What does Kyle think? That they'll try to kill you the moment they have a chance. Probably true. He also thinks we should let them try. Use you as bait again. Also probably true. Asha turned to face him fully. And what do you think? Daniel looked out at the settlement below, at the water purification system they'd built from garrison equipment and scavenged materials, at the solar arrays slowly being assembled, at the children playing in the compound while their parents worked, at the impossible proof that his engineering could build life as easily as it had once built death. I think, he said slowly, that I've been bait enough for one lifetime. Time to be something else. Like what? Like someone who builds bridges and then actually gets to cross them. Asha laughed, the sound lighter than he'd ever heard it. She took his hand, the scarred one with the damaged fingers. Then cross with me. Below them, the settlement continued its work. Above them, the first stars pushed through the dust. And between them, 2 people who'd met as captor and prisoner, who'd fought side by side and nearly died together, who'd chosen to believe that the impossible might just be possible after all. Daniel had walked alone across the salt desert, leaving breadcrumbs for anyone who was listening. He'd been dragged in chains, laughed through broken lips, and muttered 3 rings left, like a prayer or a promise or a threat. Now he stood on a wall at sunset, hand in hand with someone who understood what it meant to fight for a future, and he realized the rings weren't the point. The signals weren't the point. The point was that someone had answered, that 2 nations, 2 peoples, had met not at swords' points but at water's edge, that children played while their parents built instead of hiding while their parents died, that diplomats were coming instead of soldiers, even if the diplomats might still carry knives. Progress. Small, painful, expensive progress bought with blood and salt and 17 graves, but progress nonetheless. You're thinking too hard, Asha said. Occupational hazard. Stop it. Just be here. Now. with me. So he did. He stopped counting angles and calculating outcomes and planning for disasters that might never come. He just stood on a wall at sunset with someone who'd saved his life almost as often as he'd saved hers, and he let himself feel something he'd forgotten existed. Peace, temporary, fragile, purchased at terrible cost, but real. The sun touched the horizon and held there for one perfect moment, balance between day and night, light and dark. Asha lifted her hand, the one wearing the iron ring on her thumb. The dying sunlight caught the metal and set it ablaze with copper and gold, the reflection painting a small circle of dawn-colored light on the stone between them. Daniel looked at that reflected light, a ring of fire on gray stone, and thought about circles, about things that connected, about how a piece of metal could be a promise, and a promise could light the way through darkness, and light could become hope. Asha saw where he was looking and smiled. She turned her hand slowly, making the reflection dance and shimmer. The circle of light grew, contracted, pulsed like a heartbeat. 37 promises, she said softly, and all of them led here, to this moment, to us. The sun dipped below the horizon. The ring's reflection flared once, brilliant and impossible, then faded as the last light died. But the metal still gleamed faintly in the dusk, holding what remained of the day. The stars grew brighter, and in the settlement below, someone started singing, not a funeral song this time, but something new, a celebration, a beginning. Asha's hand tightened in his. "Don't you dare die on me, bridge builder. Wouldn't dream of it. Liar. Maybe a little." She smiled. He smiled back. And somewhere in the desert darkness, the wind carried their laughter across the salt flats like a message, like a signal, like a promise that someone, somewhere might hear and answer. 3 rings left had become 37 promises, had become hundreds of lives saved, had become this. A moment of peace on a wall at sunset, 2 people holding hands against the darkness, daring to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. That was the bridge, not metal or stone or engineering, just the choice to keep building, to keep hoping, to keep crossing toward each other even when the ground between was impossible. Daniel had walked alone so that 2 nations could meet at the light. Now he stood with Asha and watched that light spread. It wasn't victory, it wasn't safety, it wasn't the end of struggle, but it was a beginning, and sometimes that was enough.